everyone, and welcome back to the Our Global podcast. I'm Jennifer Higgins, your host, and today we're talking with Ismail Amin. He's the CEO of TALG, the law firm TALG, and we're talking about, his specialization in the business and biotechnology law, and especially around issues around AI, because it's 2025 and we can't not talk about AI. And maybe we'll dive into a bit for specifically AI for drug manufacturers. As someone that works in tech, that's one of the most exciting use cases of AI. If it's done safely and legally and with privacy, it's more interesting than creating code that's not good and trying to get rid of jobs. Instead, it's working with the human beings to reach our next level of potential. So I think these are very exciting topics. So now, without further ado, I would like Ismail to please introduce yourself, everyone listening.
Thank you, Jennifer, for the gracious introduction. Very nice to meet everyone. My name is Ismail, and I'm the CEO of TALG. We are a multi-jurisdictional law firm in 6 states in the United States, soon to be international as well. And so we are essentially a business, banking, and biotech firm. Those are the predominant platforms we serve, and we have our pulse on all kinds of emerging technology, AI being the obvious center point and focal point of what we're doing given today's day. And we're happy to be here, happy to answer any questions and add as much value as I can.
And certainly all three of those industries are deep in the weeds with AI already in varying levels of adoption. So that's exciting to hear. So because AI is everywhere, so it could be for everyone, but who would most benefit from listening to this conversation?
I think our audience, they're business owners of all kinds, right? So we serve businesses in different sizes, different markets. Our bread and butter business is the middle markets, and they could tremendously benefit from this because they may not have the resources of a publicly traded company, but they're also not a small business necessarily. And by mid-market business, I'm referring to anyone with over 25 employees, for example. That's a great definition. But we don't want to neglect the small businesses, because I think AI can really help small businesses accelerate into becoming a mid-size or a large business, or hopefully a publicly traded business one day. So our clients and our friends are predominantly business owners, and having an understanding of how AI and machine learning works, I think can do nothing more than help, especially when everyone else, competitors, customers, potential customers, are actually using those technologies.
Absolutely. And it touches everyone, and your employees actually are motivated to want to try to use it. So if they're not, or if you're not providing guidance, they could be using it wrongfully. So this is an interesting situation where the law, well, this is really common in tech actually, but where the law can be somewhat behind the actual reality and the fast pace, because this is one of the few times when the world uses the term disruptor and it actually means something. I think AI is validly so. So how are your clients investigating using AI and approaching it?
Well, it's interesting. We have a lot of clients who are using AI very aggressively, and then we have other clients who are very shy and don't want to use it. And then we have clients kind of in the middle that have put their feet in the pool, are nervous about it, but start using it. Obviously, we have chat as the primary platform that everyone seems to use, or Claude AI is another example. And so obviously Google has its platform. And so these platforms are being used relatively, across the spectrum for business owners, and to varying degrees. I've seen our more sophisticated clients really use Copilot. That's a platform offered by Microsoft, and they use it essentially for everything from being an executive assistant to scheduling to research to drafting. And so it's quite robust. There's so many different paths to go. And so that's kind of what we've seen. I've had a few clients who've sent me emails that I can tell are AI generated, And it's interesting. It's like speaking to a colleague in the legal profession because it's quite sophisticated dialogue, talking about nuanced legal issues. And I was impressed, quite frankly. So that's kind of what I've seen thus far with our clients and our friends.
I guess the concerning bit of that situation is your clients may think they know the law as well as you, and just because they can allow ChatGPT to generate something on their behalf does not mean, or Gemini in their Google email, does not mean that they understand those topics. So I think there is a rise of a need for more subject matter experts, not for assuming that this generalist AI can do it for us.
I think that's an excellent point. I firmly agree. So we at TALG have adopted AI. We have specialty software that we have used in our infrastructure to serve our clients, and it has been fantastic. That said, we have a very robust AI use policy because there are a lot of shortcomings with AI. And what you mentioned is, to me, the number one shortcoming is context. When you pull something from AI, it's a lot of information. That's number one. You have to digest that information, you have to analyze it, and most importantly, you have to understand it. And so when you are taking really abstract legal concepts, for example, in a case, and that's what we deal with. We deal with complex cases involving really esoteric issues, and a client is trying to understand what this machine has generated, it can be challenging. And so you've got to be able to appreciate the context of what kind of information you're getting. And that's where we hope we can add value. And I've seen this across all platforms with respect to professionals, whether it's in the medical profession or in the accounting professions, and how to deal with clients when they ask these really nuanced questions that are derived from AI.
Mm-hmm. And I think something that both journalists and lawyers probably is drilled into us at university, but we really respect is citation. And certainly with that may vary depending on the source. So don't just because a chat GPT says something and they're not providing their citation and sources is not something to trust versus an advisor.
Oh, that's an excellent point. And I don't think that is really highlighted or emphasized enough in with respect to the general use of AI. You have to really vet the sources because I've seen it happen even with our platforms that when we have sophisticated legal-based platforms where the citations are either wrong or they're misapplied. And so the same holds true with all the other platforms that are available for the $20 or $50 a month. Just because the machine is spitting something out, that doesn't mean that it's accurate, and it doesn't mean that the source that it was derived from is accurate. And so it unfortunately, AI is not at a place yet where we can have full confidence in everything that we're receiving. It still needs to be vetted, and that part of the intellectual puzzle is something that is up to us to fulfill.
Absolutely. And I think something you said that was important that we shouldn't assume everyone does. You need to pay for AI. No matter what one you're using, you can't use the free ones because then you're just feeding into the world's largest research projects. And you could risk in Europe GDPR and California CCPA, other issues. And it also comes down to how you're going to train your staff, because I know the statistic is still, what, we're 3 years into this now, baffling. Less than half of organizations have an AI usage policy, which at best should at least say, please do not put client and HR information or any personally identifiable information into these large research projects. But there's a lot of things that companies need to consider. So when we're talking about your three main client bases, business, tech, and biotech, what are things they should be considering in their AI policies that you should have if you don't yet?
Well, you touched on a lot of them, and I generally agree. I think number one, it's the source, the platform you're using. Make sure that that is a reliable platform, and it's a platform that returns information that's generally reliable. I think that's number one. Number two in your policy, I think there needs to be a clear designation of what is on limits and what is off limits. So the platforms that you vetted, those are clearly on limits, use them. The platforms that you have not vetted, I think your policy should expressly say, these are some of the platforms that we do not want you to use in connection with performing your roles or your duties or executing them. The other thing to note in an AI policy that I think is critical is handling confidential or private information, anything that's consumer sensitive, for example. We have a lot of clients in the medical field, whether it's hospitals or practitioners, labs, for example. They have a lot of sensitive patient information and data. If they uploaded that data into some platform, yeah, you're going to have to really understand what that platform's policies and practices are with respect to retention of information, deletion of information, who reads that information, how secure it is if there's a hack or there's a leak. All of that is imputed to you in terms of liability exposure. So just be mindful that even if you have a vetted platform, if you're uploading information, especially sensitive information, you should have a policy on what your team can and cannot do.
Yeah.
The third thing I'll say with respect to a policy is there should be limitations on the use of AI, meaning it should be used for all the good stuff, research, organization, some drafting, but it shouldn't be used for the bad stuff. For example, using it inappropriately to conduct surveillance, diligence, cyber stalking, side hustling, things like that. You want that in your AI use policy. You want it to be clear and unambiguous.
And then I think we learned from, still shocks me that we haven't had as many examples since Samsung, but you don't want any proprietary information going into these public bots. Whether it is code, whether it's patented drugs, whether it's potential recipes, things like that. You don't want to put anything that is the core of your business value and is secret or legally protected in there. You just don't want to risk it, I would say.
Oh, absolutely. So that goes into that bucket. And I should have touched on that when we discussed what you're uploading, the type of data. I focused more on confidential patient and consumer information, but trade secrets are trade secrets. Proprietary information is proprietary information. I want to be clear, that stuff should not be going into a publicly available platform. And I don't care what their policies say. If there's a breach of that policy by an employee or a third-party malicious attack, your trade secrets, your proprietary information are at risk. So I completely agree. And that's another thing that needs to be spelled out in your policy.
And to talk about one of your core groups, the drug manufacturing and the different biotech industry, I guess that's under the FDA, the US Food and Drug Administration. Haven't lived there in a while, but I remember Fauci. So with that in mind, I know they have they've actually had for a while, some sort of guidance around, how to use AI in drug manufacturing and the implication for measuring, modeling, and control technologies used for pharmaceutical manufacturing. Again, I think this is where we have certainly a lot of malicious actors in cybersecurity attacks, but we also have some of the really, truly good, happy potential of AI. So what are those rules and how have they evolved, or how are they being applied now?
Great questions. So just backing up for a second, the FDA has tried to really stay ahead of the curve in terms of defining AI in the context of food and drugs, defining machine learning as well. And so they've treated AI as essentially software as a medical device. And so they've used AI and machine learning technologies to try to figure out ways to assist in medical device manufacturing, in drug manufacturing, and therapeutic R&D. And so specific to the manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, they've tried their best to provide guidance And that was what my piece back in 23 was about, was the original guidance the FDA gave with respect to how drug manufacturers can use AI and machine learning to assist in manufacturing protocols. That goes into what's known as CGMP. And those are good manufacturing practices. And so that dovetails into how can you efficiently manufacture drugs with more precision and quicker. And so AI has really revolutionized things in that regard. It's made everything very interesting with respect to being able to scale manufacturing capabilities and to eliminate errors in the manufacturing line. And so it's done that through obviously using robotics with respect to manufacturing operations, for example, sorting pills, doing other types of manual things that we used to do by hand. And so the machines and the software that guides those machines is incredibly precise. So the AI has tried to stay, the FDA has tried to stay ahead of really giving guidance to manufacturers and how to use those programs.
Mhm. And I think what's interesting there is these are not thrilling or creative jobs. What they're talking about there is something that human error could mean someone's life, potentially. It is pharmaceuticals, but also it's enhancing things that I talked to the chief AI officer, because that's a role now, and I think actually is a valid one, at SAP, the big accounting, etc. behemoth. And he said their number one use case by far is scanning receipts. So then, because we've all done that, we have a need to get money back, and then you have to type in the information from the receipt. You have to make sure it's correct and all. No, you just scan it, the AI reads it and done. That was not creative work. That was not potential. So that leaves more time and money within a pharmaceutical industry to have less room for errors that could potentially save lives, but also more money going into research, which frankly is needed right now, and into potentially impacting people's lives more positively. So that's really a great use case for AI that people aren't looking at, instead of it's like it's not been terribly overwhelmingly successful yet in writing code. It's been great for writing documentation, which is something nobody wants to do anyway, or developers certainly don't want to do. So look for the boring first before you look for the wow, because maybe it will enable the humans to do the wow.
Oh, well said. And it really eliminates, like pill sorting, for example, used to be a very manual task. And so there would be a lot of errors. There would be a lot of issues. We all know what happened with the Tylenol, tragedy in the 80s, when there was, unfortunately, somebody encapsulated Tylenol with cyanide, and there were deaths and injuries that arose from that. And so that to me, that's an example of where we don't necessarily want people involved, not because of those nefarious risks, although they exist, but primarily because there's errors and people can use their capital to do much better things, like you said, which is actually figuring out which therapeutics can help, which diagnostics can help, and which devices can help. And so using capital in that regard, the human capital in that regard, I think is great. And so there's been discussion, a lot of discussion and fear about how AI is going to take jobs. I think this example is a perfect way of showing how AI can actually create more jobs, just in different contexts and settings.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And then as we're applying this, is there anything that companies in any case need to be transparent that they've used AI in the process at any point, or should they be talking about, yeah, they're using AI, but we have a human in the loop? What are the requirements right now? And also, in the lack of requirements, the best practices?
Yeah, so that's great questions. So yes, I think as a best practice, you should be disclosing the use of AI. Now, the regulatory bodies, let's use the FDA as an example. There's a whole framework in terms of disclosing what you're doing, inspections, auditing, and redundancy. And so you're going to have to disclose if you're a drug manufacturer and you're submitting different applications to the FDA, you're going to have to disclose, for example, what types of data you relied on, how did you get the data, what was the studies performed on the drug. Let's say it's a new drug application, for example. And how did you sort and generate the data? And so that's where you're going to need to be specific. You're going to need to say, we used a software program that has machine learning capabilities, gave us parameters, and gave us this particular data. We then got the data and had, statistics performed by a statistician, for example, to eliminate trial control errors. So I think in a regulatory setting, in a highly regulated industry like drug manufacturing, medical device manufacturing, therapeutics, healthcare, it should be disclosed. And frankly, when we get into our other practice groups like banking and securities, I think there's also disclosure requirements. We've seen recently, for example, financial advisors, investment advisors getting into trouble because they're using bots to communicate with clients about investment strategies. And those bots are based on AI platforms. They certainly use and utilize machine learning, but disclosures weren't appropriately made, and there were fines issued by the regulatory agencies, the SEC being, a case in point. So anytime a company's in a highly regulated industry, whether it's the drug, biotech, banking, securities, I think it should be disclosed. But beyond that, a best practice is disclosing it to your clients regardless, so they understand that you're using it. And I think, from our experience at least, clients appreciate that. And they see that you're willing to be innovative.
And what it comes down to is you first have to then have an AI policy to then be able to communicate it with your clients.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is that they're going to want to know that there's an AI use policy being in effect. They're going to want to know that your team is trained, and they're going to want to know that their data is safe.
It's not even July 2025 yet. I assume by the end of the year, the whole world will have changed dramatically, since in part by AI. So thank you so much, Ismail, for this conversation. And thank you, listeners. If they want to get in contact with you and ask more questions, maybe ask for help writing that AI policy, or how to go about safely experimenting with this very disruptive technology, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way is sending an email directly to me. And my email is my first initial I as in India, my last name, AMIN, Alpha Mike India November, at talglaw.com, TALGLAW.com.
Fantastic. And if this was useful to you who are listening or watching us on the YouTube, etc., please share it with other people and spread the word. I think it was a fun conversation. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Jennifer, for your time.